think in my 45 years, I've gone through a whole stream of reporters and newspapers.
We're on.
Okay. Hi. Hello, and welcome to Straight Talk with Susan. I'm Councilwoman Susan Siegel, and this is a program to talk about what's happening in Yorktown with a special emphasis on what's happening at the town board level. The format for the program is very simple. It's modeled after the Sunday morning news program, Meet the Press. And so every 2 weeks on a rotating basis, I'll be inviting one of the reporters who covers Yorktown to be my guest. The program is totally unscripted, and the reporters have been told they are free to ask me whatever it is they want. The goal, as always, with me has been to keep the residents informed about what your town officials are doing and also how your tax dollars are being spent. If you have any questions about anything we discussed today or on any other town issue, please feel free to get in touch with me. My phone number, my email will be flashed on the screen along with some websites, and you can also find me on Facebook. Yes, I've gone into social media even at my age. And tonight, I'd also like to call your attention to one special website, www.ciyinfo.org. On that site, which I've been hosting since 2008, I post summaries of all planning board and town board meetings. And you can follow the board of your choice by meeting date or also by subject. So you can find out what's happening with Costco, with the Spectra pipeline, with the upgrades that are happening at the Staples Shopping Center. Some of these issues can span several months, and some, like Costco, can span several years. Okay. Tonight, I'm especially pleased to welcome Rick Pezzullo, the editor of the Northern Westchester Examiner, and it's a special day for Rick because he's celebrating his wedding anniversary, and also I understand his wife's birthday, but I won't tell you what the age is because she might not be too happy with that. And so since we're televising during the daytime, taping this during the daytime, I think he'll be free to maybe take his wife out for dinner. So Rick, thank you so much.
Hi, Susan. Nice to see you.
Okay. And go ahead, shoot the program.
Right.
It's up to you.
All right. Well, before we get into some of the specific issues, I want to ask you, because I've been curious since you've rejoined the board, how has it been to be back onto the town board after, obviously you were supervisor for a few years, and you had a couple of years you weren't on the board, but you were very active from from being in the public, asking them a lot of questions. How has it been to return? Is it like you've never missed a beat, or is it different? How is it different between being a councilwoman and the supervisor?
It's different in, let's say, two major respects. It's an interesting question that you ask. One, I now have more access to information, and I don't have to submit FOIL requests. Right. Okay, I can just email a department head and say, please send me. Yeah. So it happens a lot quicker. But I think, obviously, as a council person, I can be more effective because I have a vote. For many years, I was concerned about resolutions being passed at town board meetings, and the public had no idea what was being passed. So it was when I was kind of as an advocate, it was through my constant asking that they finally printed the resolutions in the meeting agenda. Okay, so you could see it before, and people who get the agendas by email can see it. Right. At Tuesday's meeting. It's been the practice with Michael Grace that many resolutions get passed at work sessions at the very end, when the resolutions, the content is not listed, in the agenda, and you've seen this. And I've always had questions about it, and I haven't been happy with it. And it was going to happen again at this Tuesday's meeting, and I finally said, enough is enough. Right. If it's time sensitive, obviously there's no issue with passing it. And I think the board came to a consensus that we will now vote for resolutions at the regular meetings, which are televised, and when the text is in the agenda. So that kind of gives you one example of a change. Right.
Has government sort of changed since you were the supervisor to now in terms of the way things are done, or is it operating pretty much the same in terms of the way resolutions are put together, or the way information is flowing? I mean, there's been a lot of, with the social media, with the emails and stuff, it seems like there's more access to information. But I mean, do you find anything has changed since you were the supervisor and now you're on the board? Because what's been 4 years now? 4
I
years.
was supervisor 2010
Yeah, so
to 11.
Yeah. Or is it pretty much run the same?
I think each supervisor, and remember, the supervisor is the day-to-day
Right.
person in charge, and it's really up to the supervisor to funnel information to the town board. You cannot constantly be sending emails or being on the phone to council because you'd never get any work done.
Right.
So there's a line, a gray area. How much do you pass on to board members as things are occurring, and how much do you tell them only at the last minute when they have to know to vote? I think my style was much more open and communicative with town board members. I try on major issues, not
Right.
on minor things. This is what's coming up in the pike. Some property owner came into my office and wanted to meet with me about rezoning something. Do you have any thoughts? Just
Right.
to kind of give them a heads up. I don't think that's happening as much these days, and the board is getting information at the last minute. We have, if you've seen it, a big green loose leaf book that we typically get for work sessions, and it has background information. Again, every supervisor has his own style, so I'm not being critical. I'm just
Right.
saying when I was doing it, I made sure that this binder was complete by Friday, and department heads knew if they were going to be on the agenda that they would get the information to my staff, at least by the morning. So the board, when it was up to them to pick it up, but if they picked it up on Friday or even came into the office on Saturday or Sunday because they all had keys, they could read it, know in advance what the issue was, and possibly think about some questions they wanted to ask.
Right.
Now, if you see this information late in the day on Tuesday, it
Right.
makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have time to digest it and to think, well, what's the issue?
And it's even tough for the public and the media because we don't know what's happening or what this issue is, so it doesn't really help anybody.
That's right,
Yeah.
and my long-standing position about televising work sessions.
Right.
I mean, that's something that
Yeah, I was going to ask you that later, but what about that? Like, what do you think the objection is to that, and part and parcel with that, just having microphones there? Like, who objects to people be able to listen to what's happening?
It was because you made an issue of it, and you said something to me about 2 weeks ago that you couldn't hear something. That was actually on the agenda late Tuesday night, and I said, because I know that some of the board members object to televising it, I
Right.
made it clear that this has nothing to do with televising. And when the room was rewired and we had all the new audio equipment put in when I was supervisor, we made sure to have a separate PA system for the room because, Ray Arnold, our former
Right.
planning director, who's, advanced in age, and he said he's hard of hearing, and he would sit in the audience and couldn't hear anything.
Right.
So I always had Ray's comments in mind
Right.
when we rewired it. And I said, please, let's have the microphones. It's simple, the wire just gets hooked
Yeah.
under the table, and I believe there's a switch, and all you do is flip the switch. Michael said he would look into it. So I hope that it will be, will be audible. I know that it's not going to make for good visuals when you're seeing the backs of people, but remember, the work session is for the board to have an exchange
Right.
with other people, so we're sitting face to face, but at least the public should hear.
Yeah.
Ideally, we should have a system where they could see a visual. When we are poring over a map and saying
Right.
the road should be here or there, obviously the audience doesn't know
Yeah, well,
what we're
some
talking
towns
about.
have screens where they, it's above the town board or whatever the board is, so you can actually see the map that you're talking about. So you don't have to hover over the people or to me, I don't understand the real difference between a regular meeting and a work session. They're both open public meetings.
Absolutely.
Sure, you're conducting yourself differently in terms of the public meeting. You're voting and you're listening to people. The work session, you're still doing the work of the town. So why shouldn't people be able to see it? It's just
to me, it's
Yeah.
common sense, it's openness, it's transparency. When I made this suggestion in 2010, I said I would even pay for the additional time because we do pay somebody,
Right.
to come and tape the meeting. the board didn't want it. Some people are maybe afraid that the public will hear what they say or how they talk, or that they don't say anything. I don't know. I was glad that the board agreed to televise at least the Spectra portion of the informational meeting Tuesday. But I didn't realize this at the time, but because the only mic at the board table was for Michael and Mary and Diana, who were reading the questions, that people didn't hear comments that the board members made because it wasn't mic'd. So
That defeats the purpose.
Obviously. So I'm going to pursue at least using the PA system for the meeting. And also, when the room was wired, we did put the wiring to have 2 screens up on either side of the board table.
Right.
So the wiring exists. It's just a question of the money to purchase the screens.
But just it's flipping a switch, really.
It's 21st century. Let's go with it.
Well, speaking of that work session the other night, it was an unusual one, a long one, and there was the first 2.5 hours was on TV, which is different for people, but the subject matter, the pipeline, obviously that's a big concern of many people, and I thought there was some, not startling, but some interesting revelations that they made at that particular meeting in terms of, that the pipe is going to run behind some people's backyards, athletic fields, through, it seems like a lot of destruction. What did you come away with from that meeting? What is it about it that still concerns you, even after hearing them?
Well, I'm glad you talked about, the ball fields, which is legacy, and also homes. Very few homeowners are really impacted by the AIM, the first project, because it goes from Lexington to Stony Street and it goes through Town Parkland. Yes, it will impact more directly the people who live on Stony Street. But the next phase that Spectra is working on, Atlantic Bridge, will go through the rest of the town from Stony Street clear to the Somers border. And that will go through the backyards of homes, it will go through Legacy Field, and it will go near schools. So that is a concern to hundreds, if not thousands, of Yorktown residents. It will have to cross roads. There was a question about Willow Pond, which is at Curry Street. So that's going to have a major impact. And let me take this time to just remind people that I just learned it at the meeting Tuesday that FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that has the oversight and has to give the permission, will hold a scoping session in Yorktown on May 11th at the YCC. Scoping session is where we tell FERC and we tell Spectra, this is what we want you to incorporate into your draft environmental impact statement, DEIS. I have to stop using the acronyms all the time. So I don't know yet the timing of that, but that will be important for all of the homeowners, to know about. So the questions, going back to Tuesday, dealt with both the AIM and the Atlantic Bridge. So I hope that wasn't confusing to people. On AIM, I think I came away with a lot of my questions unanswered.
Like which ones in particular? Because it seemed like they made an attempt to try to answer some of the major ones, but which ones didn't they answer that you?
I think people are still concerned about the air emissions coming from the pigging station, and when they take out the old pipes, and remove them, and they have to clean out whatever is the residue in the pipes, and they have to dispose of that.
Now, when they spoke about the receiver launcher thing, is that the pigging station or is that something different? That is, because they kept going back and forth, and I was a little bit confused, and I imagine other people were, if that was the same thing, because they kept saying launch receiver, then they would say pigging, and it almost sounded like two different things.
I guess the technical term is launch receiver, because a capsule goes from one end where it's launched, and then the receiver is where it goes through the pipe, and it basically scrubs the inside of the pipeline and takes out any residue which would interfere with the flow of the gas. They said it's done once a year, and that's what they said, and they also said that they wouldn't use it until 2017. Because if they're going to complete the construction in 2016, so we have a year.
But is it still going to be on the Yorktown property, or is it not going to be? It's
going to be on their right-of-way.
So it is going to be there?
On their right-of-way, And the issue is they were kind of wishy-washy when one of them said, well, I'm not sure if it's going to be visible from Stony Street. It says it right in the FEIS that it's going to be visible from Stony Street, and that's why I asked about the possibility of screening. They were ambiguous about noise. about the level, and I finally got them to say that there'll be more or less a constant hum coming from this regulator that they have to put up there, and it's at 55 decibels on average.
Right.
I have to do a little bit more checking because at that point I'm not sure what 55 decibels is.
Right.
You know, modest, minimal, significant, I don't know.
Right.
So I have to check that out. I'm concerned about what's going to happen to our roads.
Right.
I mean, when they come up Stony Street, okay? And that's something I'm researching about whether we can do some kind of performance bond to protect in the
I
event
thought it
of
was
this
a good
damage.
point that when you asked them, how are you going to turn around? Because if they do come up Stony, what are they going to go all the way down to Shrub Oak and where the high school is? Or how are they going to turn this thing around?
Good question.
Yes, it sounded like some massive trucks that they were talking about.
Yes,
Yeah.
one of them, at an earlier meeting, they explained that the truck that's going to unload some of the new segments
Right.
of pipe will come on I think he called it a low bed,
Yeah.
low
Yeah,
bed, I
something
think.
like that, yeah.
And so they will park on Stony Street because they obviously can't get into the
Right.
site, and then so that they will do obviously some traffic management, but then the truck can't turn around. So we want to know what routes it's going to go on.
Yeah, because I don't think they could turn around. I think the next road is it Judy or whatever that road is past the.
No, that doesn't go
I don't even
anyplace.
know. No, I wonder if they can even turn around, like go up and back. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
I marvel.
It's a
when I see
very
these big
narrow
trucks.
road, so I don't. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. So this is what we need. So
Yeah.
we have to make sure we understand this. And the issue came up, if they're going to do traffic management and use our police, they should be paying for any overtime.
Sure.
For our traffic management. So that was another concern. So it's the pigging station, it's the noise, it's the traffic control, the condition of our roads. These are some of the major concerns for AIM. Okay?
Right.
We also, at this point, will have to negotiate an agreement with them because their temporary workspace will be on town parkland.
Right.
And I've been in touch with the supervisor and said, I want the town board to be involved in this negotiation early on. We
Right.
need some kind of understanding compensation for what they're going to be disturbing our land. I want to make sure the trees are marked. That was a question
Right.
that I asked because I've heard too many stories about, a contractor calls in a tree company and they just, it's easier to just cut it off.
Yeah.
And so we have to clearly mark that. I still have questions about stormwater, and I was glad to hear Tuesday that they have finally submitted their stormwater plan, and it's being reviewed by the town consultant now. So I have to be
Right.
in touch with him and see if he's happy with, satisfied with all the conditions.
I know there was a few weeks ago there was a coalition of towns and grassroots organizations that got together in Cortland, and they announced how they were basically appealing the FERC decision and asking them to rehear it or whatever the terminology is. There was a lot of, the Peekskill mayor was there, the Buchanan mayor, the Cortland supervisor. Vishnu Patel was there. I don't know if he was representing Yorktown. I think he was more there
And so,
himself.
yeah.
But, do you think that Michael Gray should have been there as a supervisor in Yorktown? And how come Yorktown hasn't officially passed anything saying, we don't agree with you, you made a hasty decision, why not? Can you please rehear it? They seem to be one of the few municipalities that haven't taken that action. Do you think has that ever come up in discussion with the board, or should it? Or
I wasn't on the board when Spectra was first
right,
proposed. Yorktown got involved only through the advocacy of residents.
right,
Michael Grace has been a strong supporter of Spectra from day one.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say, he never informed the board. Going back to your earlier question, I still remember the night when he said, here's an agreement with Spectra. They're going to use, our parkland, et cetera. Sign it. We have to get this to the state right away
Right.
because of alienation. The board had no idea what was going on. In fact, Diana Quast, who was the deputy town clerk who was taking the minutes that night, who also wears a hat as chairman of the Recreation Commission, didn't even know that alienation of parkland was part of that.
right,
So he's been supportive, so he has not participated in all of this. Now, I realize that issues are different in the different communities.
right.
Obviously, Cortland is more concerned with Indian Point.
Right.
It's a concern, obviously, to Yorktown residents also, but
Right.
a little less so. But I think the town board was remiss in not being involved early on. They came in kicking and screaming to finally, sometime in 2014, to send some kind of memorandum to FERC saying we want more health and safety risk assessments and monitoring done.
Right.
And again, it was through the advocacy of a group, Keep Yorktown Safe, that was even strengthened.
Right.
Once I got on the board, a lot of this was already done. So I worked with Bruce Barber, our environmental consultant. The only issues at that time were the DEC permits for air and water quality, and air didn't affect us as much, but the water quality permits certainly did. And I basically wrote, with working with Bruce, our concerns to DEC.
Right.
Going forward, Atlantic Bridge, I can assure you it's going to be very different, because I'm on the board and I will make sure that Yorktown 1 becomes an intervener, in this process, and is at all of the meetings, and we will be watching out for how this is going to affect us.
Yeah, because it seemed like even, the work session the other night, it was really just you and Councilman Patel that were really grilling, the Spectra people about the details. The other three just kind of sat back, and, I don't know if you can, read into that at all, but it just seemed like there was a lot of opportunities to question a lot what they were saying, and it was kind of like a two-person, attack for you guys. You're the only two actually saying anything. So to me, that seemed like if you're watching this, you're watching that particular meeting, you come across as like that, Yorktown is kind of okay with the plan at this point, and maybe there's no. I mean, do you hold any hope that this coalition effort will do anything, or you think it's pretty much?
I don't know. I personally am not against the pipeline expansion, but I think it was made clear, and the Spectra representatives acknowledged what I have known for quite some time. This is not a replacement of an aging pipe, because aging pipes have to be replaced.
Right.
I mean, that's been said, and that is totally wrong.
Right.
And they acknowledged last night that this is an expansion. Okay?
Yeah, they said
and
it was for being, I guess, demand is what's...
It's demand.
Yeah.
Because even before last night, I had been in touch with the federal agency that regulates pipeline safety, and I specifically asked them, are there any requirements that a pipeline is only good for X number of years?
Right.
Okay? And the person I spoke to said, absolutely no. As long as the pipeline is maintained, okay, and they have regular inspection forms and whatever that Spectra fits out, it could go on indefinitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have buildings that are 200 years old, 300 years old. They're still being used as long as they are properly maintained. So I was glad that Spectra at least acknowledged that publicly. They had acknowledged it at a Somers meeting, but there are some town board members that still say, well, it's a 6-year-old pipe, it should be replaced.
Right.
My concern as a council person is the health and safety and well-being of my residents and of my community. And so that's what I have been concerned about. The air monitoring from the pigging station, from the removal of the pipes, the traffic, the stormwater, those are the issues. Once we get to deal with going in people's backyards, I also have to be concerned about that. Obviously, I'm concerned about what's going to happen at Legacy Ball Field.
Right.
They said they were going to drill underground if it works out, but they don't know yet if it's going to work out. So that's my concern. And I think that should be the concern of every board member. It's like when a developer comes in and he says, oh, my project is the best thing, all kinds of benefits, and I'm going to solve all the problems. You have to ask questions. You just don't take their word for it.
Right.
Okay? Just like Costco ended up with a better project because of the intervention of some of the residents that asked hard questions. Okay? So I think it behooves the town board members to ask those hard questions.
Yeah, it just seemed like too many times the supervisor would just kind of fluff off, it's our hands are tied, it's a federal thing, we can only do so much, and, it seems like that's kind of how his response was to a lot of the questions.
That's right,
Yeah.
and I mean that's not the way. Now, granted, a lot of the concerns that have been raised during the review process for AIM, FERC has dismissed. You heard it about Indian Point.
Right.
Okay? So I'm not in a position to challenge what the Nuclear Regulatory Energy says. But we can certainly make our cases known. Okay, we can certainly demand, and I'm glad that New York State DEC and New York City DEP are doing a what's called a hard look at their stormwater plans,
Right.
because there's a lot of flooding already on Stony Street. Okay, a lot of runoff.
Right.
We have to make sure that we don't increase it. You know how dangerous Stony
Right,
Street could
sure.
be. So we have to make sure that that's being done.
Yeah.
It needs a hard look. We just don't take their word for it.
Right. And now that they've kind of made the point that
We've got about 3 minutes.
Okay.
My earpiece never seems to
Okay.
work, so.
the point that they made, there was a lot of questions, at least emailed, about the granite knolls, how that was a lost opportunity, and Inspector, they said flat out, we're not doing it. What can a town do with is there any plans to do anything with that now to improve that particular site, or is that something for the future now?
One group did an inventory of athletic fields in Yorktown, and between the town and the school district, we have, I think, 30 fields, okay, which is a lot. And our population hasn't grown in Yorktown. So no one has really questioned, do we need more fields, or is it we would like nicer fields, pristine fields like Legacy, which is a magnificent place. So we have to look at that before we do that. I was supervisor when we purchased Granite Knolls, but it had started prior to my term. There was never any plan. I state that emphatically. There was never any plan to, in the near future, to develop that for active recreation. That's money.
Right.
Okay? You've heard the complaints about the roads, right? Well, do we spend money on paving roads, fixing our neighborhood flooding issues, fixing our deteriorating buildings, or do we build more ball fields? That's what it basically boils down to.
Yeah. And the town already has fields that need, or recreation that needs work, like the tennis courts.
We have tennis courts.
Yeah.
I was told when I was
You
supervisor,
can't even play on.
we were still paying for the tennis court that was already closed because it wasn't maintained properly.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I know there's several that you can't use because they're beat up with the paving and everything.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
So why don't we fix up what we
Right.
have and better maintain it? And again, in terms of the ball fields, let's do an inventory. Is it a scheduling problem, or is it that people just want the highest quality fields?
Right.
And I don't have the answer because nobody has looked at it. We just blanketly hear, I want more fields, and that's it.
Right.
And forget about the money and the cost of maintaining it.
Right.
And there was never any monetary amount that Spectra said it was going to put into this. So when it said, oh, we lost a $2 million project, I'm sorry, no way
Yeah.
was that.
Yeah, it was just
gonna
kind of like
be.
a carrot that was thrown out there that nobody ever bid
was
on.
pure hyperbole.
Right, exactly. So that happens.
So that's what it is.
Yeah.
But the question deserves to be answered because a lot of people that just think that we gave away this wonderful opportunity, but they really weren't looking at the numbers and they weren't looking at the impact. And I think we are coming possibly to an end, and I have to figure out how to deal with with this earpiece. Rick,
Sure.
thank you very
Sure.
much. And again, I invite people, if you have any questions, to call me at the phone number, to email me, look at my Facebook page. My goal is getting information out to the public. That's always been my response. And I look forward to seeing you, and I hope you have a good dinner with your wife tonight.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to do Italian tonight.
Okay, and Yorktown certainly has enough Italian restaurants,
that's
so
good.
I don't know where you live, but keep in Yorktown.
Okay.
And we'll see you in roughly another month,
Yeah,
and
sure.
I hope you'll have some other good questions
Absolutely.
to ask. Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay. All right.